When did you get started on guitar?
I started playing the classical guitar when I was 10 years old. As a kid, I had been playing violin when I was very young, 4 years old, started as a Suzuki violinist, and switched over to cello when I was six, and also started playing the piano. And I was in a tiny town right in the middle of New York State, Hamilton, New York, which is where Colgate University is. And there was one strings teacher in the town at the school. His name was Frank Vecchio. And so I started spending more and more time with Frank, especially as I got into first and second and third grade, playing mostly cello and playing little string quartets and things. And uh, and so one day I remember I just asked him which was his favorite instrument because he sort of taught all the kids all the instruments. And I asked him what was his favorite. He said classical guitar. And so that was enough for me. I went ahead and asked my parents for one. I got one and started studying. I've been playing classical guitar ever since.
Nice. So what brought you to Austin, Texas?
Certainly. I did my undergraduate work with Steve Aaron at the Oberlin Conservatory of Music, and one of my dear colleagues there was a fantastic young player named Randall Avers. And Randy, after Oberlin, went on to Paris Conservatory and then ultimately ended up in Norway, where he is now, and I miss him terribly. But as I was nearing the end of my studies at Oberlin, Randy and I were talking about where to study for graduate school. And he and I agreed that coming to University of Texas at Austin, study with Adam Holtzman was one of the very best places that I could end up. It seemed like everywhere I went for competitions and to festivals, I was hearing his name, I was meeting his students, and it was just one of my top choices. So I applied to four places and was fortunate enough to get in to study with Adam. I came down to start my master's degree in 1996. And 7 years later, I'd finished a doctoral degree, and it was 7 fantastic years with Adam, and he and I are dear friends.
Awesome. So when did the Austin Classical Guitar Society get started then?
The Austin Classical Guitar Society was around apparently in various incarnations for decades before I arrived in 1996. The organization became incorporated in 1990 and actually attained nonprofit status with the IRS in 1996 before I arrived. I arrived in August 96, and that nonprofit determination had just come in right before my arrival. So I had started a student guitar club at Steve Aaron's suggestion at Oberlin in 1993. And so when I arrived here in 1996, the Austin Classical Guitar Society was a very, very small organization, and they were looking to find a new person to run it. And so somebody had heard about my past with the Oberlin Guitar Club, which had grown to be a nice little student or presenting organization by 1996. And so they handed me the reins, the corporate documents, and said, "Let's see what you can do, Matt, with the Austin Classical Guitar Society in 1996." So the organization began in 1990, nonprofit status in 1996, and that's the point that I arrived.
And was it pretty small when you took over, or did you already have a big budget
Yeah,
to
the
work
Austin
with?
Classical Sure. The Austin Classical Guitar Society was a very small organization when I arrived in 1996. It really operated mostly like a guitar club. The board of directors was primarily guitar players. The primary activities of the organization were monthly meetings where guitarists could get together and talk, have an open mic. And there was a series of artists that was booked for the 96-97 season. I think our overall total operational budget was maybe $3,000 or $4,000 that year. There was about $500 in the bank when I arrived. So it was a relatively small operation. Most of the people that came to the concerts were guitarists or guitar fans because I was a university student. And a lot of the activity in classical guitar sort of surrounded the University of Texas. We actually had the events at the university, and so it was somewhat insular. Great little organization, but definitely an organization that was in its infancy and really focused on the guitar community as opposed to the broader community like the organization is now.
How'd you make that leap to the big community version of it?
Certainly. It's been 14 years. And the organization has grown tremendously. So we're looking at an annual operating budget of nearly $500,000 now. So that's every year. And you can do a lot of work with that kind of money in the classical guitar world. And that's something that really supports a vast network of educational programs that we run. We have a robust staff of employees and also contractors that work for us. We have contract composers that compose music for us all the time. We have teachers in the schools and many more activities. So you can imagine that there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into getting from a $3,000 or $4,000 a year organization to a $400,000 or $500,000 a year organization. I think, I have been centrally involved in the organization for these 14 years. For the first 4 years, I was the president of the board. There was no staff. There was no paid staff. We were all volunteers. And then several years, I sort of burned out and stepped back and came back in as executive director in 2003. And I've been operating as executive director ever since. And in that interim, we had other great leaders come on and help. And I think what the main shift that occurred over the course of time, and I don't know that this was a conscious thing, although it would be if I had to do it all over again. The main shift that occurred was that we came to serve the community at large. We became a community service-based organization as opposed to an organization sort of by guitarists and for guitarists. And the fact of the matter is that when you begin to serve the community in meaningful ways and you develop relevance and relationships with community members, then the community comes out and supports you back. And that's sort of the magic symbiosis that develops in great nonprofit organizations in the arts that are dedicated to serving the community. How it's happened over the years, obviously I've been very involved with it, but it's been on the blood, sweat, and tears of many people, colleagues of mine. Adam Holtzman at the University of Texas has been a great supporter of the organization, and really particularly our board members. The board has developed and changed dramatically over the course of these 14 years. And at the beginning, our board members were called upon to show up at events and set up chairs and stands and bring cookies and do whatever else they could do as volunteers. But as an organization gets to the point where it's operating with $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, or $40,000 a month, right, which is a lot of money when you think about that, your board of directors starts to have much greater and different kinds of responsibilities. As we need to go out and find the support in the community to support the kinds of operations that we have. So that's the short overview, is to say that there's been a tremendous amount of growth. The growth is rooted in a mission that involves community service, broad community service, which results in very specific things in terms of your programming and your practices. And in terms of how it happened, you look at leadership, you look at the work that I've been able to do, but you also look at all of the incredible people from the community that have helped mentor me and support this organization through these changes.